Rob Hall hightails it over to Walgreens when he learns his wife Kandi is there, and she's rendezvousing with her lover, who also happens to be her boss.
In January, Rob sends Kandi a message that says, basically, good luck with Emmett. Once the honeymoon's over, karma's a bitch. I'll have the last laugh.
Now, like a hunter stalking his prey, Rob pulls up to Walgreens. Store surveillance tape shows Rob entering the drugstore. He paces the aisle looking for his wife, but there is no sign of Kandi. That's because she's with Emmett, having sex in his pickup truck.
Rob goes back out to his car. He then moves his truck to the other side of Kandi's car, which is critical because he has now moved his car outside of the surveillance camera shot.
In that parking spot, next to Kandi's car, Rob lays in wait for his wife. 17 minutes later, Kandi and Emmett pull up and seat Rob. What they don't know is he has a gun in his pocket and revenge on his mind.
Kandi says at some point Rob provoked Emmett by saying, "Why don't you go home to your wife? You have 5 kids at home." And that set Emmett off. He pushed off of his truck and came at Rob. Kandi says she turned to leave and never saw what happened after that.
What happened? Someone was about to end up dead.
3 gunshots. Emmett was shot in the chest and in the head, and Rob had a gunshot wound, a graze wound to his head.
Kandi frantically calls 911. Minutes later, help arrives. Rob is rushed to the hospital, but Emmett lies bleeding out in the arms of his lover, Kandi.
Kandi says she then runs over to Emmett and is trying to put pressure on the wound, trying to figure out what happened. She saw Rob start to get up, and she said she actually grabbed the gun and she said she threw it like a bowling ball across the parking lot.
It didn't matter. Emmett died at the scene. Cops swarm Walgreens and arrest Rob on the spot. But across town, Emmett's wife, Ashley, is about to get the worst unsuspected news imaginable.
And I opened up the front door to these 3 strangers. They said there's been 2 shots of a gun. There's been an accident, an affair.
Ashley says what happens next is a blur.
I remember looking around the room and everything just felt dizzy, and I almost felt worthless. Like 3 people all were making these choices that I had no idea were going to change the rest of my life.
Ashley claims she had no idea about Emmett's affair until that fatal night.
Tragedy, of course. You lost a husband. Your kids are now fatherless. But the insult to the marriage as well. It was basically his own doing. I mean, how do you reconcile those feelings?
It just didn't make sense, and it was really a mix of emotions. Wondering, like, why wasn't I enough? Why wasn't I enough for a husband who had a moment and a chance? I begged him to stay home and fight for me, but instead he died fighting for someone else's wife.
Your husband died in the arms of another woman. How did that make you feel?
Worthless. Ugly. Fat. I just had a baby. Just alone. Humiliated that the whole town heard the same news at the same time I did.
At the hospital, Rob is treated for head wounds. Cops question him about the shooting.
He was on morphine. He's not being super lucid about what's going on. And he says, Emmett shot me. And then he says, I shot. And he stops. And he never says the end of the sentence.
What happened in that 17-minute gap between the time when Rob waits for his wife by her car and Emmett winds up dead? Their surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment of execution, but there is one person who was there.
There are no witnesses in the parking lot or customers or neighbors that saw someone pull a gun on someone else. And the only eyewitness is Kandi Hall.
And cops soon bring her in for questioning.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh.
When detectives walk into the interrogation room, Kandi is hysterical.
Yeah. Are you Kandi?
Yeah.
Please help us put this together as best as we can. will match statements with evidence. I mean, you know how police work goes, I guess.
know. I do it all day long.
Okay.
Kandi tells detectives she went to Walgreens to pick up a prescription, and it's there she met with Emmett, her boss. She says they are just friends and needed to vent about her marital troubles.
Rob, my husband, has he has had a really hard time with me working with Emmett. Emmett being younger and, you know, aggressive attorney, and I have been working with him since October.
Okay. Are you and Emmett involved in a romantic relationship?
No,
Have you ever been romantic with Emmett?
no,
Okay, now let's say sexual. Have you been sexual with Emmett?
no.
Kandi is obviously lying to detectives. Her naughty emails, texts, and coworkers would attest to that. Then she tells cops she got in Emmett's truck and they went to get gas.
So when I went and got gas at Fred Meyer with Emmett, and then we were driving back, my daughter called me and she said, "Mom, where are you?" And I told her I was with Michelle, and that is my best friend Michelle, because I didn't want to tell her who I was with.
But Kandi leaves out one very important detail. After getting gas, the couple headed to a secluded spot to have sex in his pickup. Candy's daughter sensed something fishy about her mom's Michelle story. That's when she called her dad.
So then Rob calls, and he calls me, and I pick up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I am out." He said, "Are you out with Emmett?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're just talking." And then Emmett goes, "Let me talk to him." And then Emmett got really upset with Rob on the phone and said something like, I'll break your head.
Kandi brushes off Emmett's threat and they drive back to Walgreens. But when they arrived, Rob was lying in wait.
Emmett got out of the truck, and I got out, and I stood there, and Rob came up, and Emmett's a very aggressive man. He body builds, you know, so he's really pumped up all the time, and he got like this close up into Rob's face, and I remember, and I go, "Hey, knock it off, this is ridiculous."
Kandi says when she turned to leave, she heard the tragic sound ring out.
And I hear pop, pop, and then pop, and that's all I heard. And I turned around, and both of them are laying on the ground. And then I ran over, and I was like, I was pretty stunned at that point. I was like, what in the world? Because I didn't even know what the pop, pop was. It almost sounded like balloons popping. Emmett was kind of like on his, like this, and I didn't know what was going on, and I just see all this blood gushing down his rough face. So I went over and I covered. He had this wound on his top of his head, not covered, and I'm calling 911.
Kandi says she never actually saw the shooting. She then describes how her husband Rob stood up after being shot.
He was walking forward, and I see him going down, and I'm like, because I didn't know what he was grabbing for, because I didn't even see it, because it's little.
Rob was reaching for the gun. A terrified Kandi didn't know what her husband would do next.
So I grabbed it, and I was holding on to his shirt because it looked like he was going to fall, and I grabbed the gun. I go, no, and I'm like, no, you need to sit down, no, and I took it and I threw it in the street, and that's all, and then he collapsed.
Up next, the stunning trial that robbed a small town of its innocence as Kandi Hall takes the stand.
The judge said that he's never had somebody change their story so many times.
She was lying.
Yeah.
And in court, a shocking moment as Ashley finally comes face to face with the couple who changed the course of her life forever.
Her and her husband at the trial were very loving to each other, saying, "I'm sorry, I still love you."
I can tell you about my babies pounding on a casket. Their hero's body lying inside, screaming for him to wake up, and screaming at me because I was telling him that we couldn't open the box.